Hey copper nerds, so why all the fuss about 1794 large cents? Let's get into it. If you watch the channel, you know that I am really into 1794 large cents, and this Sheldon 69 is the channel's signature coin. Certainly it's my nicest by a fairly wide margin. It's got a EAC grade of a net 50, and it came from the magnificent Herman Halpern collection, among others. It's a fantastic coin. What do I like about 1794 large cents? And it's not just me, they kind of have a cult following. There's a subgroup of the early American Coppers Club called the Boys of 94. And 1794s have caught the eye of many collectors going all the way back, well, certainly far before, but up to and including Dr. William Sheldon. Sheldon would be who the S in the varieties of early date large cents stands for. You know, your S69 or S35 or S17A. That's Sheldon 69, 35, and 17A. So Dr. Sheldon himself was really into 1794 large cents. And Sheldon is who invented the 70-point grading system that we use across numismatics today. That all came from Sheldon. And that was actually a pricing tool more than it was a grading tool. It was used to say that, a MS-70 was worth twice as much as a VF-35 and a 20 worth half as much as a 40. That's kind of how that scale came about. But 1794s have long caught the eyes of collectors, and there's a few reasons for that. First, there are 58 different collectible varieties and another 11, I want to say, non-collectible, very rare varieties of 1794 large sets. So it's a very large series. Get out of there. There we go. Next, they have the lettered edge, which you only saw towards the end of 1793, early 1795, but all through 1794. So these are all going to have that really cool 100 for a dollar lettered edge. Additionally, the dies were all hand engraved. Now, some things were hubbed. The head itself was hubbed, and this is a head of 95, head of 94, head of 93, so different hubs there. But the hair details were engraved, and the dates and lettering were all hand punched. The wreath, the basic wreath, I think also had some elements that were hubbed, but again, all of the letters were punched in. That creates some unique spacing and things, and then the hair details all being held hand engraved creates quite a bit of variation in hair detail. So the distinct variation from one variety to the next is a reason that 1794s are so coveted. By the time we got into like the matron heads and the braided hair series, those, like the entire coin was hubbed. I think these stars were punched in on the date, but the entire head, I believe, was hubbed. Maybe the letters and the coronet were punched. By the time we got into the braided hair, and here's a better example, pretty much the entire coin, obverse and reverse, was hubbed in with like all the details. So in the earlier 1794 large cents, we had that hand engraved, hand punched variation between varieties. So they're very distinct. No two of these could be mistaken for the other, just at a glance, really. 1794s are also relatively affordable, or they can be. This one I got for like 220 bucks, and I did do a little work darkening up the surface on this one because it had been sort of freshly cleaned. And this one was also in that couple $100 range. Pretty nice, sort of fine to very fine coin. It had someone punch the date in over top of the actual date, and I don't completely hate that. It's got mild surface granularity, but not a bad coin for a couple $100. It's got our edge letter devices on it. 100 for a dollar. Always check those because the edge letter blunders and errors are a pretty neat area you can collect as well. I've got a few. There's some videos on the channel about those. The die steel in 1794 was not very good. So you get a lot of really cool die breaks and cracks. This 35 has a huge north to south bisecting crack. So that's another thing that's interesting. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and set these off to the side, and we're just going to pull up Chuck Heck's 1794 Die States book and take a look at that together. Raise up a little bit here. Okay. Let's just look at some fun cracks. I like Sheldon 23. Oh yeah, this book is in, I think, die emission sequence rather than Sheldon number sequence, but here we go. There's the 23. So you can see that it starts out with a pristine obverse die, picks up a really fairly dramatic break, and you can see it running here, and then a second one from right there. Bring that up closer. That's really cool. You don't see these types of dramatic breaks in other series as quite as often as you do in the 1794s. And while we're at it, let's just flip through and find a couple of others. Which one's this? That one I'm not familiar with offhand. Oh, it's a late 27. It's light. It's not, what do you call that, a buckle? A bulge? Yeah, it's not exactly a crack, but that's neat. A bit of a die failure. Those soft dies, when you hammered them together, striking coins, they didn't hold up that well, or the heat treat was inconsistent. They often had impurities, so the dies didn't last all that long. None of them ever lasted a day, and they were doing a handful of 1,000 strikes on average in the 1790s before they had to be replaced. I'm just kind of casually flipping through this book to look for some fun die states or some fun clash marks. This must be a 32. Yeah, check out those clash marks on the 32. What you're seeing there is the cap clashing repeatedly with some rotation. That's pretty neat. Look at all those. There's as many as 7, I believe. Yeah, check out this one. Really, really cool. The wheel spoke reverse. Pretty famous coin. I don't have one yet, but check out all those breaks. Let's find one that's late. Here we go. That has got a little circulation. The center of the die sunk, which then wore prematurely in circulation, but you can see all of those spokes. Very, very neat failure. Oh, there's some cool cuds as well. When we get to Sheldon 62, you'll see some cuds. We've got a couple of different marred field obverses. That's just from, I believe, it's a chip out of the surface of the die, probably from the heat treat process. Just a little bit about clash marks. Lots of cool clash marks. Again, with those inconsistent hardnesses, you'd have some pretty good clashes in, imparted on one of the dies from the other. There's a couple of cool die cracks there. On the Sheldon 40, which is one I don't have yet. What do we have here? 41. Oh yeah, 41's got a couple of cool cracks there, but also some clashes. That's what we're seeing there, the clashes, but also some pretty cool die cracks. If I back up a page, you'll see those better. Here we go. Isn't that neat? See how that crack goes through the D and United over to cent, and then it curves up, just goes straight north, and then you got another crack coming in between the A and T and states, heading right into the wreath. Very interesting stuff that you don't see very often in the later large cents. Oh, Sheldon 43 is one of my favorites. That picks up and then gets real heavy. Over there. And there's quite a bit of offset. Just take a look at the shape of the U. There's been movement on the die along that fault line. Really, really neat stuff. And that's another great one. I didn't really announce that this is just one of those informal, rambly, little chatty videos that I don't have any real rhyme or reason to. Just talking to you guys about why I like 1794s. That's an NC. It's got a big reverse bisecting crack north to south. They're very rare. That's probably all 4 of them right there. 51 has a break that shows up through the date. Yeah, right there. Sheldon 49's neat. 50, 52, 53. And we're going to get into some other cool breaks here coming up. That's a 64. 65 develops a pretty good size one on the reverse. Yep, you can see that right there. 65 is also one of the most common varieties out there. However, finding them in late die state is not all that easy. I made a video about the Sheldon 26 and 32, which have great die breaks that can be found affordably. If you haven't watched that video, you might check it out. 68, this is my favorite. Well, I think it's my favorite die break of all the 1794s, and you can see that running straight through Liberty's face. Very, very cool. And did I skip over the 62? I might have. We'll have to go back to it so you can see that cud. Actually, 70 is a fun one. You can see this crack runs down Liberty's face. There it is. That develops quite far down the face. Here we go. That's what I was looking for. That is a fantastic die break. Mine's a fairly late die state, but also has a little bit of wear on the cheek, so you can't quite see how advanced that crack was on mine. I'd like to get one in high grade eventually. 72 has a really neat one that goes across the face as well. It's kind of hard to see there, but it runs through the hair, across the forehead, and through the top of the hair. We got to get back to the 62 because I was talking about it, but let me find that in the index. Oh, it's the very first page. Sheldon 62, page 151. Okay, here we are. And then die state 2 has that big old cud. Pretty neat. And you can see that the cud's retained because there is some dentals on the ones that are in mint state, which that little dental imprint on the cud wears off really quickly. But that is a cool one. And I think, well, I've said it before, but maybe not lately. I think 1794s are the second coolest series in large sense. 1793s are by far my favorite. They're just too expensive to collect. I do have a Sheldon 1. It is beat to heck, but has all of the devices on the reverse presenting nicely. There's it appears in some videos, you can check it out. But the chain scent is absolutely iconic. And then we move into the wreath scent, which is a drastic design change from that kind of scary Liberty to a very interesting depiction of Liberty. And she has hair that kind of looks like Rick Sanchez from Rick and Morty. If you're into cartoons, adult cartoons, Rick and Morty is it's a fun little show. But that hair is what that reminds me of. And then it's got the wreath on the reverse, of course, which is where we see a wreath in place of a chain, and that's quite nice. And then we get into the Liberty caps, and I think 1793s are the most aesthetic. They're just, again, so expensive and so hard to find, but the beaded border instead of the dentals, and that head of 93, which I do prefer to the heads of 94 and 95, just wonderful looking coins. And I guess that's another reason I like 1794s is they do have the 3 different head styles. It's not often that you get that much variation within 1 year. Of course, we have 3 different types within 1793, but in 1794, we have 3 different head styles, which are neat. And I don't have any 1793 Liberty caps. To the extent I could afford one, it would be so ugly that I wouldn't enjoy looking at it. So I stick with the 1794s where I can afford to have some very nice looking coins in my collection. This is my favorite variety of large cent period, is the Sheldon 14 with that giant bisecting crack. But again, I don't want one that's hideous. And that means I'm not going to be able to get one ever, most likely. Let's look at a few more of the Liberty caps. Oh, now we're into some NCs. All right, jumping up to our 1794s. So I enjoy the variety that's offered within the 1794 series. It's one that's collectible. It's tough to do a complete variety set just because you have some real stoppers in there. And I myself may end up only doing 55 of the 58. You know, the wheel spoke and the starred reverse, which if you're not familiar with the starred reverse, here it is. And the Sheldon 37, which is a basic, boring 1794. It's not particularly nice to look at. It's just rare. But check out all those the little stars in between the dentals on the starred reverse. Just exceptionally cool. But in this book does have, it only shows the nicer condition census coins for most varieties, but I think it has every 1794. So if I wanted something that looks like that, I'll be spending, you know, $10,000-$15,000 or more. And what am I looking at, you know? Well, yeah, this is starred reverse. You can't see any stars on it, but yeah, it's a starred reverse. Who cares, right? So I may very well stop short of those last three in my collecting. I've got most all of the others that are difficult beneath those three. So I'm pretty well on my way. I have 44 varieties and I can get to 55 without too much difficulty. I have the hardest ones secured other than the last three. But I just think it's a really neat series. There's just a lot of variety, you know, in terms of color and character, which comes with copper. But I think that the copper stock from 1794 had so much variation that you're going to see a lot of different colors, even between varieties, than you would in a, you know, a matron head or a braided hair series large cent. So that's just a little bit about why I like 1794s. I can't possibly overstate how much I like the edge lettering. It's just very neat. Additional thing to look at with your coins is that lettered edge. But they're just, I mean, they're just beautiful. That is an exceptional depiction of Liberty. And by far my favorite coin to collect in the large cent series. So, with that, thanks for checking out this little rambly, informal video. I'm going to do these from time to time, just kind of talk about a subject freely. And I'll look forward to talking to you a little bit in the comments. Maybe tell me why you agree or disagree that 1794 large cents are the series to collect. If there is a drawback, it is that they are expensive. They're not all a couple $100 like this one was. You know, this one is in that couple $1,000 range. This one's a few times that. This one's probably closer to like 10,000. But if you're careful, you can pick up a lot of still fun to collect and appreciate examples like this that are a couple $100. So it's not an impossible series to collect, but you do have to be pretty dedicated to it. And I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.